Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is once again that time of the week. What time of the week is it? Well, it's that time of the week where we dig underneath the propaganda, cut through the mud of all the blather and blight that is the mainstream media and our horrific politics of the day. It is the weekly show where we call out the establishment on its BS. It is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo or Western Michigan University. Well, we got a lot to talk about on the show today. In a little while, we're going to be having our friend Dan on from KNOW to talk about some local protests and related to the whack BS going on in Gaza right now. A little later on the program, we're going to have an interview with another one of the congressional candidates. But first, this is an interesting little development on Friday, and this is going to lead into a broader discussion about something we talk about a lot on the show, which is media and media censorship on the internet, de facto corporate censorship of left-wing and anti-war, and definitely generally anti-establishment media. Now, if you don't know what this is specifically in reference to, I'm talking about was it on Friday? So what did the DNC decide to do? They have this new platform where they're gonna cooperatize all the workplaces, or they decided to help seize the means, or what is the Democrats' grand strategy that they revealed Friday?
Okay. For those who do not know, the Democrats decided that they were going to sue Russia, the Trump administration, and WikiLeaks for their role in manipulating the 2016 election. Basically, this is their we don't like how we think you did something to affect the election that hurt Hillary Clinton's chances of winning, so we're going to sue you so you don't look at how we manipulated the election so Hillary Clinton can win. That's this lawsuit, for those who want a quick summary, it's the Democratic Party head so far up their own rectum that they can perform their own colonoscopy. That's basically what this is. That's basically what it is.
Hey, have you seen the other guys?
Yeah. It's not that. There's so much dumb stuff that's happened this week, and this pissed me off on so many levels. The main reason why is the precedent it sets. So you're going to sue WikiLeaks for exposing the truth about the corruption within the Democratic Party after it's been proven that the Hillary Clinton campaign was in bed and was colluded with the mainstream media to not push issues that she wasn't for and to silence her opponents. Ed Schultz just did a brilliant interview breaking down how the head of MSNBC called him 5 minutes before he's about to interview Bernie Sanders when he's about to launch his campaign, and calling him 5 minutes before, telling him, "You're not covering this." Calling him and being a watchdog of the hosts, so that they will not push propaganda, push narrative that goes against their corporate sponsors.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
That's the first thing. Second thing is that the precedent it sits. So you're suing WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks is the same people who gave us the Chelsea Manning tapes of the United States bombing innocent civilians and journalists and then laughing about it. And the Obama administration didn't go after the war criminals who did that. They went after Chelsea Manning. because she exposed it. Same thing with Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden told everybody, yeah, the NSA and the FBI are doing warrantless wiretapping of everyone in America. They didn't go after the people who were doing it. They went after Edward Snowden.
Nor is it even not just the leakers. It's interesting. I'm reading this in the Environment, and by the way, Glenn Greenwald did a fantastic article about this on The Intercept.
Right.
But it reminded me of I just got done reading one of his books. It was No Place to Hide, I think it was called.
Yeah.
And in it, he talks a little bit about what it was like to be there to cover Snowden and his leaks. And he talked about just the absolute smearing he got from mainstream media afterwards, and how there's a lot of thought in his mind about whether or not the federal government was going to try to prosecute him for basically, essentially committing the crime of journalism. And it really conjures a lot of those questions back up, seeing a major political party from, the world's largest superpower, deciding they're going to sue a journalistic organization for being journalists. And I want to make sure introduce our dear friend Joe is on the show again. He helps run the International Youth and Students for Social Equality group here on campus. And he's here joining us because, it was very serendipitous. And I also want to, really thank the IYSSE and the Socialist Equality Party, and also the World Socialist website. They've all been doing a lot of really great work kind of connecting the dots on this issue, showing excuse me, how a lot of these news threads and these things that have been coming up have ostensibly been used to, censor or target the left. As a friend of mine says, Russiagate and a lot of this paranoia lately does indeed target the left. And I know there was a conference that you went to on Sunday, Joe. So I guess first kind of respond to topic we're talking about, and I'd also be kind of curious how that might have come up at this conference that you were just at, and maybe expand on that a little bit more too.
Yeah, thank you. So thanks for the introduction. I'm Joe Lorenz. I'm a member of the Socialist Equality Party, and here on campus I am a member of the International Youth and Students for Social Equality at WMU. So yeah, just to comment on this lawsuit by the DNC, I agree with the points that you were making about the fact that this is targeting Assange for what in reality is actual journalism. He's exposing the crimes of the Democratic National Committee. He's exposing the crimes of U.S. imperialism. I wanted to add that I think it goes further than just being really hypocritical on the part of the Democratic Party. I think that what we actually see here is an effort to criminalize any sort of dissent within the United States. And actually that goes back to Russiagate in the first place. What was Russiagate? And what is fake news? After all, the term fake news exploded after the 2016 presidential election. It wasn't really in common usage the way it is now. Before that, actually, it was a New York Times article right after the election that read, Facebook and Twitter take aim at fake news after the presidential election. And so that was in November of 2016. To give a sort of timeline of what's happened with internet censorship since then, in April of 2017, a few months after that, Ben Gomez, one of the CEOs of Google, announced that they were going to implement a new search algorithm, which was going to combat fake news. It was going to promote what he called authoritative content, and it was going to prevent you from seeing things that you didn't want to see, according to him. And then a few months after that, in August of 2017, the World Socialist website noted a big drop in the traffic, particularly the traffic that was coming from Google searches. And so they did more investigation. They found that this was affecting a whole range of left-wing, anti-war progressive websites like Truthdig, Counterpunch, Global Research, Consortium News, WikiLeaks, There were, I think, 13 or more originally named by the World Socialist website. They were targeted the most. I think it's up above 75% reduction in Google traffic since then. Then a few months later, the World Socialist website promoted a petition, an online petition to Google that demanded that they stop this censorship. Obviously, that was never answered by Google, by any of the CEOs.
Oh, yeah. They're too busy making algorithms for drones.
Exactly. And that's, I hope we talk about that, too. It's really significant that the workers of Google have signed a petition against the use of Google technology in U.S. imperialism. To continue with this timeline, in January of this year, there was a widely promoted online webinar in which David North, the chairman of the World Socialist website, and Chris Hedges, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, had a discussion about online censorship and the way to fight it. Sort of as that was happening, or immediately after, there was an open call by the World Socialist website for a coalition of left-wing, anti-war progressive websites in fighting this. And that leads up to what happened last weekend, was a conference held in Detroit. It was sponsored by the World Socialist website, which is also celebrating its 20th year of existence. It was started in 1998. So I'd like to just speak a little bit about the conference. It was originally intended to take up only the fight against internet censorship and how do we combat that. But just due to all of the events that have happened in the last month or so, the topic was sort of widened, and the title of it was War, the Class Struggle, and the Fight Against Internet Censorship, because this conference was trying to point out that these things are all very closely connected.
Oh yeah, and that's a great point to bring up, because this leads into something else that was related that happened over the weekend, and it's really like they pull out kind of the big, most obvious guns when it comes to commentators and media figures who are criticizing or questioning U.S. foreign policy and imperialism. Lawrence, would you want to speak more about, so there was the Jimmy Dore, if some of you would probably know him, some of you don't, but he's a fairly popular left-wing commentator on YouTube, and he was recently targeted by CNN in this very slanderous article. This was within an insane couple of days as the Democratic Party went after the Democrat.
Okay, before
WikiLeaks, I mean.
Okay, before I speak on Jimmy Dore, and I do want to talk about, I do want to hear more about the conference. I do want to speak more about this lawsuit. This lawsuit is basically is an attack in many ways on First Amendment rights, and for those who not understand this, the precedent that they're setting is that any news organization that has information that's in the best interest of the people, the American people, that the entities that information affects, they will be able to sue them. They will be able to sue them because they don't like what they're saying. That's literally what this lawsuit is basically saying. And that's the precedent that has horrible ramifications. We've already lived through 8 years of attack on whistleblowers. We've already lived through that. This is basically saying let's crank that up to 11 because the DNC didn't like the fact that their dirty laundry got aired. And let's remember, folks, what the DNC did. They changed the voting time polls in different districts where during the primary they were hiding the debates, putting it on days day before Christmas or things of that nature. They if Mika Bazissi or other people on MSNBC or CNN was to say that Hillary Clinton was not going to win, the DNC themselves would call the heads of those media corporations and check them because of the agreement that the DNC made with the Hillary Clinton campaign a year and a half, 6 months before she even announced that she was going to be running, and a year and a half before she actually got the nomination. They fundamentally colluded with Hillary Clinton to rig the primary against her Democratic opponents. And this lawsuit is basically saying, we did all this work to cheat, and we're going to blame you guys, Russia, the Trump administration, and WikiLeaks for doing what we did during the primary. It's absolute projection. It's absolute projection. And it is insane because they're refusing to learn from the mistakes of them losing to a orange-faced clown. Like it's absolutely mind-numbing.
I say like a lot of, and I'll kick it back over to you, Joe. Just this quick point. You know, a lot of people make light of how bad like the Democratic Party's strategy is, but they basically have no strategies left. The only actual strategy that would work to fight back against the Republican insurgency is if they actually start embracing policies that are, if not even taking on, or what's the word I'm looking for, challenging capitalism, even just like the slightest reforms, it's like complete anathema to them. Nancy Pelosi had a point. The Democrats, they say they are capitalists, and to do anything that would even hurt the bottom line of the people who own them, i.e. their donors, is just absolutely outside the realm of thinking for them, even though that's basically what they would need to do in order to get out of the current situation they're in.
Well, I mean, there has been some movement. For people who were saying that purity tests don't work, look at what Chuck Schumer did last week. Look at what Kamala Harris was talking about on the Breakfast Club. Look at what Christian Gillibrand and Cory Booker's doing now. Christian Gillibrand, Cory Booker, and Kamala Harris are no longer taking corporate PAC money and super PAC money. Chuck Schumer, who's been wrong on a bunch of issues, is now in favor of legalizing marijuana. So you would hear in the media talking about purity tests don't work, everyone takes campaign donations from super PACs and all that. No, that's garbage, because if the people don't vote for you, you won't be in power. And the people have spoken. These are the policies that they want. This is what the Democratic base wants, and it's moving people. And we didn't talk about Kamala Harris and her problems. We didn't talk about Cory Booker and his problems. We didn't talk about Christian Gillibrand and her problems. But these corporatists, these neoliberal Democrats, are moving more to the left because they understand that they will lose if they don't.
Okay, well, I think we're getting a little bit into the weeds here, and that's all right. We always do that. But let's kind of try to reel it back a little bit more towards kind of the relationship between this censorship, this targeting journalism, and particularly like anti-war efforts. So I was wondering, Joe, especially with like everything that's going on with Syria and North Korea right now, was that also kind of a piece of that conference talking about the relationship between the censoring of leftist voices and particularly like the census of like anti-imperialist or anti-war opinion?
Oh yes, it definitely was. So it was, like I said, even included in the title that war was one of the main focuses of this. And it actually took a lot of the, how do I want to say this? A lot of the discussion was based on this invented term of fake news, particularly with respect to war in Syria, where once again, this is not the first time this has happened. We have allegations of Assad using chemical weapons on his own people that have been unsubstantiated. In fact, the evidence of this was actually provided by the CIA-funded group, the White Helmets. There's evidence that what they actually did was they brought Syrian civilians into a hospital, caused a huge commotion, threw water on them, filmed it all, and then just left. And that the people didn't actually have any symptoms of a chemical attack. It was immediately followed by the missile attacks in Syria by the U.S., France, and Britain. But that was preceded there before any of this talk of chemical weapons in Syria. There was the talk of the use of chemical weapons against Skripal in Britain. Skripal was this once Russian or Soviet double agent who supposedly was poisoned with I can't remember the name of the substance.
I remember. It was a nerve agent.
Novichok.
Yeah.
Yes. He and his daughter were supposedly poisoned. They should have died from this. They're both now out of the hospital. And as soon as that story was sort of shown to be a lie, then we had the story of Assad's use of chemical weapons. And these are actual fake news. These are lies that are promoted by the dominant media corporations on behalf of the major imperialist governments.
Where did you get those sources from of the spy agent and his daughter, like of them being alive?
I know that Yulia left the hospital. I think that the man, Sergei Skripal, survived. Is that not true?
I don't know.
I've actually heard conflicting stories about this also. He's not being allowed to talk to the media right now.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was a couple news cycles ago. So the big cliff notes I remember from that were like Russian attack. There wasn't evidence. Jeremy Corbyn questioned it, and then he got dogpiled on by the British media, who actually photoshopped him with a Russian hat on.
There are conflicting stories when it comes to Syria, and especially the chemical attacks. I mean, the first chemical attack we learned there wasn't a chemical attack, there was a bombing, but the bombing was done by the rebels. The bombing was done by the rebels.
And we're talking about the one from last year that was very similar circumstances. The one that made Trump shoot his missile that made Brian Jennings quote Leonard Cohen, the beauty of our missiles.
The fact that he quoted he was quoted a poet because our bombs was about to go and blow up people. Like this is one of the dumbest things I've heard in my life.
That's American media for you, folks. Yeah.
But at the same time, you had same thing that happened with this. It's the same thing that happened with WMDs. We have independent UN regulators going to go see if it is a chemical attack, and they were going to go there Saturday. 2 days before they get there, the United States bombs Damascus, preventing them to go see if there was a chemical attack. It's the same thing that happened. It's what Noam Chomsky talks about with manufacturing consent. We were lied into the first Gulf War. We were lied into war in Iraq and Afghanistan. We were lied into the last attack the year ago, and this one we have no information on except the information that was given to us by the generals, and they were using social media posts, and they did not let the independent UN regulators to go see if it was actually a chemical attack done by Assad, which logically makes no sense when Assad was already winning the war against the rebels.
Yeah.
So
exactly. There's no strategic reason that Assad would want to use chemical weapons.
Right.
When the conventional weapons are already massacring people, and it's not like the United States have not used chemical weapons against our own people that are illegal under international law. We have. We've done it to our own people. We've done it internationally. So if we're going to go by that same standard, then we're living in a glass house.
Well, and I just wanted to lead into something, and I'd like you to jump on this too, Joe. You brought up how like the real fake news is like these propagandist things that our government or like the oligarchs do, such as like WMDs, such as like last year with Syria, and probably most recently with Syria too. And how like it's interesting to me how asking very basic and logical questions renders you a conspiracy theorist. Like it's used to gaslight you. Like when we were talking about the story with Jimmy Dore, the way that unfolded, the way CNN basically tried to target him is it was ostensibly. And I don't want to go too much into the weeds of this because its primary objective was to steal ad revenue from YouTube, but it was accusing YouTube of letting advertising appear on like these extreme right-wing white supremacist YouTube channels, Alex Jones and stuff, and they made a false equivalency with Jimmy Dore, who said he's on the extreme left, peddling conspiracy theories such as that the gas attack in Syria was a hoax, which one, he didn't actually say it was a hoax, and two, all he did was question it in the same fashion that many people on the left and even people on the right also did, such as Rand Paul, such as Tucker Carlson, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I would like to comment on Jimmy Dore, actually, because he actually, in addition to talking about the chemical weapons in Syria, he was recently talking about a series of articles that was published by the World Socialist website called the CIA Democrats. Yeah. This actually speaks to there are different sections within the Democratic Party, and they all sort of are vying for their own class interests, but there is a substantial section of the Democratic Party that has a definite strategy of completely intertwining the Democratic Party with the military intelligence apparatus. Mm-hmm. So the articles I'm talking about are called the CIA Democrats, which Jimmy Dore was taking up. Notes that an extraordinary number of former intelligence and military operatives from the CIA, Pentagon, National Security Council, and State Department are seeking nomination as Democratic candidates for Congress in the 2018 midterm elections. And these articles were published in March, so they are now a little out of date, but it lists, I think it's over 50 Democratic candidates running are former CIA military intelligence or special forces or combat veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan or other military veterans and career military personnel or civilian Pentagon, State Department, or National Security Council. And actually in many of the races that these candidates are in, they are overwhelmingly funded better than the other candidate. And this is because they are backed by the most powerful leadership within the Democratic Party, and this is a definite strategy on the part of the Democratic Party, on the part of this section that is really vying for more censorship, more war, more attacks on democratic rights in general. And it actually has to do with the strategy that is promoted by the Socialist Equality Party for combating internet censorship, as well as the drive to war, as well as other attacks on democratic rights. I mean, the Democratic Party will not talk about the rights of immigrants anymore. They've been thrown under the bus. Yeah, would you like to say something?
I mean, what is it? I mean, a lot of this goes back to the topic that we talk about on this show a lot, and that's money in politics. If you saw out the days after the strike in Syria, if you looked at the stock market, Boeing, GE, Raytheon, all of those weapon manufactured companies, stock went up $5 billion hours after the strike in Syria. Why? It's because those companies give billions of dollars in campaign contributions, give millions of dollars in campaign contributions, not just to Republicans, but also to Democrats. So, and it goes back to what we talk about on the show a lot, the military-industrial complex. Every state in the United States has a weapons manufacturing part of their economy in every state in the United States. So when you talk about, when you want to hear people that are Democrats talk about anti-war, that goes against the special interest of the people who are making weapons in their state. If they're making the drone program, drone software that pilots the drones, if they're making the drones themselves, if they're making bullets or bombs, if those jobs help stimulate the economy of every single state in our union. So you're not going to hear an anti-war message because that goes against some of the constituents of the politicians that they're supposed to be representing, when we should be having an anti-war message because we don't have enough information on what we're doing.
All right, well, let's take it to Joe, and then I think it'd probably be a good time for a break. But yeah, go ahead.
I do agree with that point. The power of money in politics is enormous, but I want to point out that the connections between the drive to war and money in politics go deeper than just the manufacturers of weapons. The U.S. economy has been financialized over the last 30 years. Major aspect of the biggest corporations is all speculative action on Wall Street in the stock market. And the stock market performance is tied to the ability of U.S. corporations to control trade routes throughout the world, to control cheap labor havens outside of the U.S., and to control access to basic minerals like oil. And those interests are completely tied not only with the manufacturers of weaponry, but with everyone who has millions of dollars invested in the stock market. So it's not just that like upper 1%, but it's the next 9% after that has seen their wealth explode in the last 20 years based on speculative financial activity.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Couldn't put it better myself. I think we're going to take a quick little break. When we come back, we have our dear friend Daniel Smith from KNOW. We're going to broaden the discussion that we're currently having on media censorship, anti-war, the peace effort, to include what's going on in Gaza. And hey, something you can actually do here locally beyond just listen to us criticize imperialism and capitalism and whatnot on your radio dial. So you are listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Be apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in the Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
Are you trying to get your local Kalamazoo business name out to the WMU and Greater Kalamazoo communities? Why not do so while supporting Radio Evolution through underwriting and donations? For more information, please visit widrfm.org.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution. So, as I said, we are joined now by our friend Daniel Smith. And so, Daniel, before you showed up, we were having a discussion basically about how we were tying it to how the Democratic Party is targeting WikiLeaks and kind of broadening that out to like the larger assault on journalism. Now, you're organizing an event on Friday in relation to Gaza, but I think what would be a good way to kind of springboard from that, and we'll kind of, I want to get kind of thoughts from across the panel, is let's talk a little bit about how the mainstream American media has been covering what is going on in Gaza, or really how they have not been covering it. And we'll start with you, Daniel, and I'm wondering, is this kind of lack of coverage in mainstream media of what Israel is doing on the Gaza Strip, did that kind of spur KNOW to organize this action you're putting together?
Well, I think what spurred the action was just how egregious it was. What was happening there on you have thousands of people peacefully demonstrating unarmed at the border for their right to return, which was guaranteed by the UN Resolution 194. Just showing up there and say, hey, don't forget about us. The conditions in Gaza are just horrendous. It's really an open-air prison. People can't leave. And I was looking up the size of Gaza. It's about 1/4 the size of Kalamazoo County. And 2 million people live there. So there are, and because of the blockade, which has been happening for 10 years around Gaza, basically people can't get in and out. Everything is controlled by Israel. The electrical, how their sewage plants are going to work and so forth, and things are getting to the point where basically Gaza is becoming very shortly to be uninhabitable, where the water systems are just unusable. So meanwhile, our government is spending $3.8 billion a year military aid to the state of Israel, and so these are these bullets that are killing these people that are at the border, being shot at by snipers, are being killed by weapons made in USA, or paid for by USA. And so it just, I think it's just so egregious. I just felt like we had to do something. The mainstream media pretty much ignores Gaza unless, or they ignore the whole Israel-Palestine issue until maybe they don't report on any nonviolent direct actions that happen. They only report if maybe somebody shoots off a rocket or something, in protest against their conditions. That's reported, but thousands of people nonviolently protesting and being shot at by snipers, that's hardly reported. At least I haven't noticed anything in the mainstream media about it. And one thing, regarding the press, it's interesting the number of journalists that have been shot.
There's a famous story, and I forget her name, but very recently there was a 30-year-old Palestinian journalist who was shot and killed while like wearing like press, like it was written across like his gear, and from eyewitness reports, it seemed like he was deliberately being targeted.
It sure seems that way. I mean, he had basically he had a flak jacket on that had huge letters. I don't know, 6 inches tall letters that said press, and he was shot right under the flak jacket, so it hit him in the abdomen, and he died a couple days later. It's very sad basically because he was a very promising videographer. It's sort of a bright spot in an otherwise very grim situation in Gaza. And he had just gone there to report on the march and was killed. His name was Yasser Mertaha. So, we just have to remember what those people are going through. So, I guess the other reason, is sort of like kind of a three parts to the vigil we're having on Friday. Mm-hmm. One of them is just asking Fred Upton to say something, to protest against it.
Ooh, that's a tall order.
Yeah, that's true. I think the only congressman that has said anything that I'm aware of is Bernie Sanders. Mm-hmm. Came out with a very strong statement against the killings, and saying we have to reevaluate what we're doing in our military aid to Israel. But so we're calling for the cutting of this aid to Israel, $3.8 billion. I mean, it's one of the most highly modernized, highly mechanized. It's a superpower. They have nuclear weapons, for goodness sake. Why are we giving them $3.8 billion a year? I mean, they're by far they receive more aid than any other country in the world from the United States. So While people in Gaza, because of the blockade, are not able to drink clean water, we do not have clean water in Michigan because Michigan, our share of that $3.8 billion, if you break it down, state of Michigan, we're giving $95 million. So, that would go a long ways to solving our problems with water and many other things.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely true. And, I think I'm going to kick it to Joe, and kind of like how I want to frame that is, was there some discussion of that at the conference too? Not only Israel, but kind of the way we have very selective outrage, and it's always kind of geared towards, whoever we're the oligarchs, the people who are kind of running the military-industrial complex, whoever we feel it's most in our interests to go after in that particular day. So I was wondering, like, how much did it kind of speak towards that sort of why things are selectively censored when it comes to that selective outrage phenomenon?
Yeah, certainly. Well, first, just to comment on it, the situation in Gaza is completely horrendous. One thing that's important to note about Israel is that it's actually the second most unequal nation in the world after the United States, and it is largely supported by U.S. imperialism. It is sort of one of the main bases within the Middle East from which wars of aggression have been launched in Afghanistan, Iraq. Drone wars have been much wider than that. But the conference on Sunday did take up the question of war and the journalism on it and it being censored. We were talking earlier about how the real fake news is the lies that are sold to the American public to sell these wars, the weapons of mass destruction in 2003, or the chemical weapons attacks in Syria last year and this year. But what is actually labeled as fake news by the major political powers, by the media in the United States, is genuinely true stories about the crimes of U.S. imperialism, or about the crimes of capitalism in general. So, actually, the first use of the word fake news that the Socialist Equality Party encountered was not after the 2016 presidential election, but was during the 2015 UAW contract negotiations, in which the rank and file of the UAW voted down a union-backed contract for the first time since the 1980s. And this was done largely because the workers were sharing World Socialist website articles that were going into the concessions and the attacks that were hidden within the contract. So the UAW sent out this email to all of their members that said, don't believe this is fake news, this outside reporting, believe what we have to say about it. And now, with the benefit of hindsight, we know that those same officials are actually now being charged with criminal charges for corruption. They were taking bribes from the company and ramming through this sellout contract. And this does tie to war, because it speaks to the strategy that the SEP promotes for combating a drive to war. And so, to continue with this, the spread of worker action being coordinated on social media is actually one of the main drivers for the ruling class to censor the internet. There's been articles in the New York Times lamenting the fact that the teachers' strikes in West Virginia and then Oklahoma and now Arizona were largely coordinated outside of the unions by rank and file members on huge Facebook groups.
That's right. That's why they're called wildcat strikes, because they're not actually authorized by the union. For those who didn't know that.
Yeah, exactly. And the unions have actually been trying to kill these strikes, have been trying to push through these sellout deals to end the strikes in West Virginia and Oklahoma. And the workers are largely coming to the conclusion that they need to take this outside of the hands of the unions, and they need to break with them. They need to start organizing their own rank and file committees. And this is exactly the perspective that the World Socialist website and the Socialist Equality Party promote, not only for the economic struggle of workers for better working conditions, for things like better pay, for health care, for retirement benefits, but also for a political struggle against war. Earlier in the program, I spoke about this strategy on the part of the highest leadership within the Democratic Party. Their strategy is to intertwine themselves with the military intelligence community. The strategy of the working class needs to be oriented towards itself, towards the working class, towards fighting the drive to war by coordinated work action that's taken outside of the control of the unions, outside of the control of the two big business parties, because all of those organizations at the highest leadership are oriented towards capitalism, are either trying on the part of the unions to keep workers separated and not link up their struggles, or on the part of the Republican Party to promote this sort of reactionary xenophobia and just sort of backwardness, or on the part of the Democratic Party to sort of corral the left momentum of the public back into support for the CIA and the military intelligence community. Those are sort of the three pulls on the working class right now. Is how are they going to orient themselves in this? This is a major struggle, not only for better economic conditions, not only for better social conditions, but for the fight against war, for the defense of democratic rights, including the right to a free and open internet, but also the right of workers to live and work wherever they want. This is a huge issue right now with the Trump administration's attacks on undocumented immigrants, and also for the fight against mass violence. This was actually something that the IYSSE, our club and our national organization, the International Youth and Students for Social Equality, we did a lot of work with the March for Our Lives protest. We intervened very strongly in cities across the United States, and we talked to high school students who were protesting. Now, the leadership within the Democratic Party that was at the front of these rallies was largely saying we need to take on gun control. We need to have more gun control. But what the students were saying was that this is bigger than gun control. This is the fact that there's no access to mental health care. The fact that there is huge social inequality that leads people into desperate circumstances. The fact that there's 25 years of war.
One of the speakers here at the Kalamazoo March, like some 14, 15-year-old kid, literally went on a clip about imperialism, which I thought was just amazing to see from somebody who's like a high school sophomore. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
So my main point, both about the conference and about the need to fight against the drive to World War III, is that there needs to be a movement organized that's independent of the Democratic and Republican parties, and that is independent of the trade unions and is based on the working class.
So, going back, let's reel back a little bit to the topic of Israel, Gaza. I think a lot of people don't understand just how we talked about the media has a very skewed view of this, but so does our Congress. AIPAC more or less has their hands on just about everybody on Capitol Hill. I mean, like Dan said, there's like literally one person who came out and actually spoke up and pointed out what was going on in an honest way. So I was Lawrence, I'll let you speak on it, and Dan, obviously get back to you with that question as well.
I mean, it goes back to where our financial ties are. We spend billions of dollars helping out our international friends like Israel. But our ties towards Israel is Israel buys a lot of our military equipment. They buy a lot of our guns and the stuff that we sell, and our economy is based off that. It's the main reason why Chuck Schumer, I think a couple months ago, was like, if you criticize Israel, you're being xenophobic. And it's like, no, you can criticize the right wing of Israel because they are doing international war crimes, and killing peaceful protesters is an international war crime. Like, it's not that hard. Just because I criticize the Democratic Party or I did criticize the Republican Party doesn't mean that I'm anti-America. It doesn't. Just because so it doesn't make sense on many levels. But the main reason why is because of our financial ties towards these countries, and also our financial ties to those special interests. Those lobbyists from CPAC and other organizations, they lobby Congress all the time, and they've spent millions of dollars on those same politicians that will not speak out against the war crimes and the mass murder that Israel did to Palestinians. Not to mention the fact that the 68 border wall that the Palestinians wanted with Israel and that Israel once agreed to, Benjamin Netanyahu keeps throwing in the trash when the majority of Israelis and the majority of Palestinians agreed to it. So it's much more complex than what we're talking about. But when you see atrocities like the stuff that's on the mainstream news, you don't get the full story. You don't get that context because CNN and MSNBC are doing 24-hour news coverage and they want sound bites. So they will say, and this has been proven if you go on YouTube and look it up, they'll say that it was a violent clash with people who had flaming tires. Flaming tires versus bullets. What? So people have stones. They have stones and flaming tires, and a majority of the time, and yes, there could be people who want to fight back, but at the same time, if you're being shot and killed for peacefully protesting, people, you cannot in good consciousness think that you're not going to get some type of response in return when people are seeing their family members being shot and killed for just being peaceful. That's right. So and the fact that you won't hear a lot of that, a lot of this on the mainstream media, because the mainstream media has a biasness, because a lot of those corporations that are advertisers on MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, a lot of those corporations have business dealings in Israel. So if you was to suggest for boycotts, divestment, sanctions, then you're hurting their corporate profits. We can't do that in America, because in God we trust, and in God we trust is on our money, and money talks over everything else.
Right, before I forget though, I want to put in a plug for the specifics of the action that's happening Wednesday, or Friday, sorry. Friday, April 27th at 4:30 to 5:30. We'll be in front of Fred Upton's office, and we'll be telling him to speak out against the use of deadly force against unarmed demonstrators, to stop military to Israel, and to spend those billions for domestic needs. So hopefully listeners can join us Friday, April 27th at 4:30. We'll be there till 5:30. We'll be sending a message into Upton's office before he closes at 5. So that's why the time is 4:30 to 5:30. But
and just out of curiosity, Dan. I'm sorry. Did you want to hop in?
I was gonna say it is 6 o'clock. We normally take a break.
Yeah. All right. Let's take a quick break. Come back. Have a little bit more discussion. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Is proud to be supported by Pedal Bicycle. Pedal Bicycle has 2 locations on 611 West Michigan Ave and 185 Romans Road. More information can be found at pedalbicycle.com.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. We wanted to continue a little bit of discussion. A little later on in the program, we're going to have a little bit from Paul Clements, who's running for the 6th District Congressional race. Me and Lawrence recorded like about an hour and 20-minute interview with him on Sunday.
Yeah.
So obviously we're not going to play the whole thing, but I will be including that in our YouTube upload edition of the show.
It was a good interview. It was really enlightening.
Mm-hmm. But I wanted to switch it up. So Lawrence, there's a couple things you want to talk about before you got to duck on out of here.
Yeah. For those that did not know or did not hear, Colin Kaepernick was in the news because he received Amnesty International's highest award for consciousness. This is the highest award that a civilian can get for his peaceful protest and for him bringing to light about police brutality and by not standing for the national anthem. It's amazing seeing how little coverage some of this got. It's amazing to see how shameful the NFL is because they will not hire this man because of his actual athletic ability. Since he's been in the league, he's had a higher. Since he has been in the league, the only people who's been ahead of him are like Rex Ryan and a couple other people, but he's way better than the majority of starting quarterbacks to this day. But because of his protests, he's been blackballed, and it's going to. And the history books will show that the NFL was shameful in their deceit because you had a bunch of rich billionaires who believed that a black man speaking out about police brutality in his neighborhood was so offensive that he could not work not because of his merits, but because of his First Amendment rights. And that's the main issue that I want. That's the main thing that I want to talk about. I want to salute to him because he absolutely deserved it. Him and his former teammate that was with him once he was giving his speech.
Yeah, that's really a hero, a modern American hero. Do you think there's any chance that any team will pick him up? I really have no idea, but it seems like it would be in some teams' interest to do that.
The Seahawks said that not the Seahawks. Was it the Seahawks? Yeah, I think it was the Seahawks that were going to do a training camp with him, but they backed out because he refuses to not stand for the national anthem. So because of him still wanting to have his peaceful protest, they're refusing to be cowards because it was a year ago that Donald Trump tweeted that he would take away there would be repercussion to the owners if Colin Kaepernick and other people who kneeled for the national anthem continue to do so. So their cowardness and their financial interest in their pocketbooks, they care more about that than the actual social consciousness of what he was bringing to light.
He would not make a pledge that he would not protest again.
Yeah, he wouldn't make a pledge that he wouldn't kneel for the national anthem. So they're like, no, we're not going to actually do the training camp. Maybe not. No. So is that transitions to what he was talking about, which was police brutality, transitions to the tale of two Waffle Houses in America, where the white mass shooter killed 4 people, injured 2 others, was taken in alive, which is good. But there was a viral video that came out on the exact same day of a black woman who asked, why do you have to be charged 50 cents for a plastic utensil, that the cops were called on her, and she was slammed to the ground. She was slammed to the ground. Her dress, if you see the viral video, her dress, her top comes off, and these 3 police officers are rolling this woman over on the ground. Not because she did a crime. She just was talking to the establishment saying that she wasn't going to pay 50 cents for a plastic utensil. I have never in the history of my life went to a restaurant and asked for plastic silverware and got arrested. Like, ever. Like, and this goes back to the whole thing about police brutality, because on the one hand, I'm glad that they didn't kill her, but at the same time, you had Stephen Clark, the man in Sacramento who had a cell phone, who had a cell phone in his own backyard, was shot 20 times. And he didn't have a weapon. He didn't kill anybody. He wasn't convicted of a crime. He didn't do anything, but he was shot and murdered 20 times. The mass shooter who shot up the place in Tennessee, he was a part of a far right-wing group that was monitored by, that were on the terrorist watch list that killed 6 people already. He was associated with that group. He ended up getting his weapons back, and then he killed more people, and they took him in alive. It doesn't make logical sense. It doesn't make logical sense that you can have someone who murders someone who murders 4 or more people get treated with more humanity than a man in his own backyard.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I think of that kind of draws to the Palestinian-Israeli issue that I was talking about earlier was there's police departments in the U.S. that send for training. They send their officers to Israel to learn how to oppress people, basically. How to use all the most modern techniques that are field tested in the West Bank and in Gaza, so that they can come back here and oppress people here. I think the police department that did not do anything to the Nazis but attacked the anti-Nazi protesters.
They attacked the
Georgia. I believe the police chief from that police department had been on a training to Israel.
Well, it certainly makes a lot of sense. If we remember back to the uprising in Ferguson, they were actually receiving correspondence from Palestinian activists, basically telling them what to expect, how to deal with this militarized police that they were dealing with there.
Right, so things come home to roost. Militarized police overseas, and now it's hitting us. So that's why we have to stand in solidarity with when Colin Kaepernick takes his knee.
I mean, but the thing that pisses me off, is the thing that irritates me the most, and we talk about the show on what's the solution? The solution is training. You need anti-biases training, and you also need training to de-escalate situations. There's no reason why it took 6 police officers to arrest 2 black men sitting in Starbucks. It didn't take 3 officers to slam a black woman on the ground and derobe her. Basically, the police are not trained to de-escalate problems. They're trained to show force, and it's been scientifically proven. They did a study in Europe where they took American officers and officers from other countries, and the American officers, when they saw certain people of certain skin tone, they escalated to violence faster, and they shot, and their reaction was to shoot and kill faster than every other police officer that they had from other countries. It's a part of America's training, and it makes sense. It takes 6 months to be a police officer. It takes a year to be a cosmetologist. So it takes more time to do a person's hair than it does to kill them.
Joe, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the whole issue of police brutality and police murder. This has become a national discussion, really an international discussion, only in the past few years. And one of the main reasons for that is that there are these viral videos that are being shared of the act of the police either murdering people who are clearly innocent or just brutalizing people in general. I've already talked about Google, but Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, has made a similar announcement to what Ben Gomez did earlier this year, in which he said that one of the problems with Facebook that they were trying to address was that there were certain viral videos that were making people sad and making people and upsetting people. And he said that Facebook would introduce algorithms to keep these away from your news feed so that you wouldn't see them anymore. So what kind of videos is he talking about? He's talking about videos of the police murdering people. He's talking about videos of, for instance, there was a teacher in Louisiana who spoke up at a school board meeting against a $10,000 raise for the superintendent when the teachers hadn't seen a raise in years. She was arrested, and this was caught on film and widely publicized. Or there was the video of a coal miner from Kentucky who got up at a town hall and started
reading the name of the sponsors.
Yes, reading the names. He was choked out, and this was caught on video. And all of these things, we wouldn't be talking about them if they weren't shared widely on social media. People in Ferguson wouldn't be communicating with Palestinian activists if it weren't for the internet, and that is exactly what the ruling class is trying to take aim at right now.
It's the same thing. It's the same. The Arab Spring. The Arab Spring would not. We would not have seen Arab Spring or Tiananmen Square if it wasn't for the internet. We would not have got any of those notifications. But it's nothing new, and I want people to understand this. Racism and corruption is not new. It's just being recorded. It's just being recorded.
I think Will Smith just said that.
Yeah, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like that's what it is. I actually do have to go there.
Celebrity's been pretty woke lately. With Natalie Portman.
Yeah, actually, the nonviolent march that's happening in Gaza was started by a Facebook post. I mean, they say, "Oh, this is Hamas doing this," but actually, it was just a video or a Facebook post and said, "Let's go do this," protest for our rights, and it happened.
Yeah.
Took off.
Oh, excuse me. So let's see. We're at about 6:15. I think what we'll do on the show is, if you guys want to stick around until maybe about 6:30, and then we'll switch over to that interview we recorded on Sunday, or at least an excerpt from it. So. Oh, excuse me.
I do have. I forgot. I have a plug of my own to make.
Oh, please do. Yes.
So, the Internet Censorship Conference happened last Sunday, but there is another event that the World Socialist website is hosting to celebrate May Day. They have an annual May Day online rally. It will be held the Sunday after May Day, so May 5th. At 5:30 p.m. It'll be online. It'll be a series of speeches delivered by members of the International Committee of the Fourth International, which is the Trotskyist movement in the world. So it has sections in the United States where the Socialist Equality Party, but also from Britain, from Germany, Sri Lanka, Australia, France, and etc. So that is May 5th, 5:30, Sunday. The theme of it will be the 200th anniversary of Marx's birth.
All right, great. Thank you for letting us know about that. Let's see. I also wanted to make sure. So Dan, could you tell us about the details of the march one more time, just for the people listening out there?
Sure. So we're meeting in front of Fred Upton's office. And it's bring signs, or we'll have signs basically saying let Gaza live and end U.S. military aid to Israel. And we'll just be there from 4:30 to 5:30, and sometime during that time we'll be gathering petitions to send a message to Fred Upton to speak out against the deadly use of force against unarmed demonstrators in Gaza and stop aid to Israel, military aid, and use those billions for domestic needs. So, this Friday, if you don't know where Fred Upton's office is, I should say that, it's 350 East Michigan. he has his Kalamazoo office, which happens to be right next to Sarkozy's bakery. So get some great baked goods before you come to the vigil. But it makes, it'd be great that you could show up. And one thing I think that some people, I would like to address one issue that just to address the difference between Zionism and Judaism. Because a lot of times the first thing you hear is that you're being anti-Semitic if you criticize Israel. So I just want to make sure people understand that Zionism is a political ideology that supports this Jewish state in Palestine. But Judaism is a religion that promotes compassion, love, and rule of law. So it's important that we don't conflate the two. That if you're criticizing Israel and its actions, you're not being anti-Semitic. So we're just focusing on the problems with the Zionist state of Israel and what it's doing, and the fact that the U.S. government is enabling this. If we were to cut off our $38 billion or $3.8 billion a year of military aid, I think things would, there'd be a much better chance of reaching a settlement in that area, which would, be a huge movement for peace around the world if that issue could be settled.
Yeah, that's very true. And, I was going to kick it to you, Joe, just one, to kind of discuss anything else about, the conference or this issue that you either haven't said or would like to touch on. But also, I'd kind of like to hear your take on, something that, Dan just mentioned, something that KNOW, and that's Kalamazoo Nonviolent Opponents of War, focus on a lot, is the fact that we have such a grossly large military budget. What could we spend that money on? How could we use those resources if we weren't pouring them so much into the war machine? So I was kind of wondering, what you and maybe the SEP's take is on that, and also discuss a little bit more anything else involving the conference or the issue of internet censorship that maybe you didn't get a chance to touch on.
Thank you. So I have a hard time remembering these numbers. I think the most recent congressional budget for the military, so that's the on-the-books official budget, which is obviously smaller than what is actually spent, was $70 billion.
It's, $700 billion.
$700 billion. I was off by 10. Right. So just to give an estimate, I think it's less than $50 billion would eradicate the issue of impure water. So not only in Flint, I think it would cost around $3 billion in Flint, but across the United States, where infrastructure is crumbling, across the entire world. I
think a fraction of that amount could probably end world hunger for a year. I forget what that number was, but it was a fraction of what we spend on the military budget. And that is a good point when you say on the books. Because, for example, a lot of the military budget is hidden. For example, the nuclear weapons, which you would think would be part of the military budget, but those are in the Department of Energy. So, and then when you look at veterans, I mean, unfortunately, our government sends troops to die for our country and to be injured for our country. They come home and they are not given the care that they need, but it is an expense that is really part of war. So you have to consider the cost of the VA as part of our military budget, which it is not.
Yeah. So I just looked it up real quick. Yeah. The World Economic Forum says that it would cost $116 billion a year to feed everyone. And so that's almost 7 years that have just been allocated for military spending, which will actually be used to do things like blockade Yemen, which there's a terrible cholera epidemic there now because of the horrible conditions, including famine, including lack of access to clean water. I mean, The military spending not only diverts money that could be used to benefit people, but it's actively being used to hurt people, to prosecute the U.S. interests abroad. That are the reason that there's been a million people killed by wars in the Middle East. This is sorry.
And I think it's 700 military bases encircling the globe. For what purpose? To maintain the empire, I guess you might say. So another expense that is not normally included is the interest on the debt that we go into for this $700 billion. We don't have that money laying around. We borrow it. And so we're paying interest on that. If you add all those things up together, it's $1 trillion military budget, really. Another thing they did during the Johnson presidency, in order to hide the cost of the military budget, because there's so much going to the Vietnam War, they did a trick where they put Social Security into the budget. So instead of over 50% going to the military and wars, it went down to about 25%, just because they threw in Social Security. Although Social Security has its own income stream, comes in and out, it has its own trust fund. Same with Medicare, it has its own trust fund. So they put those numbers in to make the military budget look smaller. So they say, 25% doesn't sound quite so bad as 55% or 60%.
Yeah, the Johnson administration really showed that guns and butter is really just guns. It's not butter. That's
Dr. Martin Luther King's famous quote about the poor are a victim of war. The poor in the United States are a victim of these wars because of the resources just being diverted to war away from what we need to do. We're so far behind the rest of the world in so many things, education and healthcare and just mass transit and free education. Any other developed country has these things. And what's the difference? Well, we have this huge military budget hanging around our necks.
Mm-hmm. I would like to maybe just tell one sort of story from the conference last Sunday. It's the story of Jacoby Hennings, who was a young worker who held 2 temporary part-time or TPT jobs at Ford Rouge and Fiat Chrysler. He died on October 20th of last year at the UAW headquarters. And his mother, Shamika Hennings, who is a auto worker of 20 years at Fiat Chrysler, was at the conference on Sunday, and she spoke to the conference about her experience about internet censorship, about the World Socialist website, and about fake news, the actual the lies that were told about her son. Kobe, like I said, worked 2 jobs. He was described by people as full of life and very driven, but he had issues with. He was stretched extremely thin. He worked 2 jobs. He would often finish at one job at midnight, start the next day at 6 a.m. at the other job. And he, what was reported is that he went to the UAW headquarters and he shot himself. He committed suicide. One of the UAW officials actually spoke to the media and said that he appeared to be on drugs and drunk. And the toxicology report from the autopsy showed that all he had in his body was caffeine. But the news companies that ran that initial story have not yet retracted their story. to contrast that, the World Socialist website reported on the murky circumstances of the death of Jacoby. It was ruled a suicide within 24 hours by police. And like I've already described the sort of character of Jacoby that his friends and family evinced. But Shamika also described how the UAW officials and the Ford and Chrysler, no one ever contacted her about the death of her son. And the story promoted by the police and by the media is chocked full of holes. And she spoke in support of the World Socialist website at this conference for defending her son against these slanders. And she also spoke to the need to come together and take the control of struggle out of the unions, who she has seen firsthand now that they're not fighting for the interests of the workers they claim to represent. They're actually in bed with the companies that they work with. It was a really powerful moment in the conference when Shamika spoke, so I wanted to share that.
Is that available online for people to see? And if it is, do you know where they find it?
There are reports on it that have been published on the World Socialist website, and there was video taken. I don't think any of it has been released yet, and it might be released sort of in sections because there were multiple reports given by representatives of, Andre Damon gave a report on sort of the technical issues involved with the internet censorship, but there were also speakers on the work of the IYSSE or on the teacher struggles, which were largely connected, as we said, to the defense of the internet. So I think those videos, they might be coming out. I would just suggest to everyone to go to the World Socialist website, read the coverage, their coverage of everything. It really, I cannot recommend it enough.
Yeah, I can't imagine working two jobs in an auto plant. I mean, one you would leaves people so drained, and to actually just a few hours sleep, get up and go and do another job at another one. It's the problem is, if I understand it right, that the beginning wages have been dropped so that they have these different tiers, so that when you're starting, you're not really getting paid that much. So, if you want to get ahead, you take two jobs, which is unfortunate. And that needs to be done away with. I just think we need to be a little bit careful about attacking the unions in terms of, because my feeling is that you need a rank and file struggle to put the unions in the right direction. So I just want to throw that in there, I guess.
Yeah, well, actually, if I can comment on that, that was the orientation of the Workers' League, which was the predecessor of the Socialist Equality Party, was to fight within the unions for the formation of a labor party in the United States and to do away with the corrupt leadership. But there was a reorientation during the 90s. It was sort of in the wake of the collapse of the Soviet Union, and in response to the explosion of U.S. imperialism in the Middle East, and then Serbia, and then in the Middle East again. And the reorientation was due to changes in the world economy. It had become completely globalized, and the unions, due to their own history, were forms of national class struggle within one country. And just due to the historical development, the globalization of the economy, the unions weren't able to respond to that. All they can say is to workers, starting in really in the 70s, but accelerating through the 80s and 90s, they would tell the workers, well, you have to accept these concessions or else the company will move jobs overseas. And so they actually sort of started promoting this nationalist orientation which is how we ended up with the, I think the UAW leaders were out supporting Trump in the 2016 presidential election. That's where that comes from. And just so due to these objective economic changes within the world economy, the national trade unions are unable to really give any leadership to the struggle, which needs to develop on an international level. If it doesn't develop on an international level, then capital will just flee whatever country it needs to secure those, like I said, those cheap labor havens, those access to raw materials, and those trade routes.
Right. There definitely needs to be international solidarity, and I think the unions have been lacking in that. But so hopefully, that'll change.
Wobblies, where are you? We need you back. Yeah. All right. Well, actually, I think with that, we should probably head to a break. I want to thank both of you for coming on the show today and talking about your respective topics. Once again, no rally Friday. Fred Upton's office, and
4:30 to 5:30.
And Joe, do you guys have another well, it's about the end of the semester, but how would people get involved with IYSSE?
You can send an email to iysse.wmitch@gmail.com. You can write into the World Socialist website. You can visit iysse.com and read our statement of principles. If you agree with it, you can join and we will get in touch with you. I also want to just plug it again, the May Day rally online, May 5th at 5:30 p.m. Go to wsws.org and you will see how to get there.
All right, great. I want to thank you both so much, and we're going to go to a break. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
WIDR would like to remind you to please drive safely. Drunk driving not only puts your life in danger, but the lives of others as well. If you find yourself stranded somewhere, consider calling Drive Safe Kalamazoo, phoning a friend, or having an Uber pick you up. Thank you for listening.
This is an open slot in the wider clock and could be filled with an underwriting announcement for your local Kalamazoo business. For more information, please visit widerfm.org and head to the support page.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to play a couple clips from our interview with Paul Clements. He's running for the 6th District, another in our series. I think I'll introduce him in the actual clip here. So let's go ahead and listen to that. Thank you for tuning in. Here is our interview there.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
If it'll work. There's it. Okay. Hold on, ladies and gentlemen.
Over a beer over at Bright Eyes. That's not a plug, by the way. They did not give us any money to say that. But we are here. This is another installment in our candidate interview series for those vying to knock Fred Upton out the box here in the 6th Congressional District. And we are joined here today with Paul Clements. And before we dive in with the questions, why don't we go ahead and just tell people at home about yourself and why you're running.
Sure. Well, I'm Paul Clements. This is my 3rd time to run. Bernie Sanders endorsed me when I ran in 2014 and 2016. And I'm running because we've got an economy that's rigged in favor of the 1%, the very wealthy, that our Congress has been corrupted by money in politics, and we need to turn this around. I've been teaching. I teach national economic development and evaluation at Western. I've been there for 20 years, and I helped to start Michigan United, which is our foremost immigrant rights organization. Been pushing for raising the minimum wage, pushing for rights of people coming out of jail and prison, that kind of thing. I was the founding chair of the Kalamazoo Interfaith Coalition for Peace and Justice. We figured that invading Iraq was not the right thing to do.
Oh, yeah. It didn't really turn out too well.
Yeah. Sadly, the president didn't take our advice. But I'm running because we need to make some really fundamental changes in this country. And I think that people have finally figured out that Fred Upton's pretense at bipartisanship is just that. It's just a pretense. And he's sort of, people are figuring out that he's sold out. And we've got a really progressive movement taking place in this country. And I'm grateful to do my small part to build that wave. And want to keep it going to make these fundamental changes our country really needs.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. And I guess typically, Lawrence, I'll have you lead in with the questions. Did you have some stuff to spring off the bat? I know you have a very nice looking sandwich there. So,
I'm gonna get to the sandwich. I mean, we don't get to this food, but normally when we talk about it, we're gonna talk about policy. And you seem you know how we are. We're angry progressives that care about money and politics. That's something that we talk about on the show all the time. And you just speaking about that. So something that's going on is trying to get Wolfpack is trying to get a constitutional amendment to get money out of politics. Trying to get a 28th Amendment. I firmly believe that is something that we should fight for, and that's something that should be a part of the Democratic platform. If you're running for the 6th district, is that something that you would also stand for? The other question would be is, how is your campaign being funded? Are you taking big donor money? Are you taking small donor money? Those type of things.
Sure, you bet. Yeah, I would definitely stand for repealing Citizens United and for a constitutional amendment to get the big money out of politics, because that's what got us into so much of the problems we're in right now, with the failure of Congress on so many things. No, I am not taking corporate PAC money. That is not happening in my campaign. I'm taking contributions, small dollar, people who share my progressive values. So that's how my campaign is getting funded. Okay. What was your other question there?
The other question is, those are the two questions. How is your campaign being funded, and how do you feel about the push to get a constitutional amendment?
Yeah, a constitutional amendment is a big lift. I would definitely support that, but you've got to get a lot of states behind you, and you've got to get a big majority in Congress. There are some bills right now that
you have to get 2/3 of the states to call for a convention. Like the Article 5 convention, and then it will come up to a vote. Then it will come up to a vote at the convention.
Okay, well, I'm glad you're more on. I appreciate you being on top of the details here. Thank you, Lawrence. No, for sure. Again, I would certainly support that, but before that, in case that doesn't happen straight away, there are some bills right now to support public funding of elections, so that.
Can you speak on those bills?
Sure. There's one bill that would say that each citizen can allocate $50 that would come out of their taxes, so they don't have to put up their own money. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like that little tick off that you do on your federal taxes. And then the idea would be that the government would match that triple. So you could decide which candidate you want to give that $50 to, and then that would be $200 for that candidate. And that way, if everybody has that, then the people running for office are going to be going to look for lots of contributions from lots of individuals who today many people wouldn't be able to afford, anything close to that. So that's one thing that I support. I also support saying that, look, the television stations, the radio stations, it ought not. For the privilege of using the airwaves, part of their responsibility in a democracy should be to provide some airtime for the candidates for elections that really matter for the people in their district. So those are two things that I would support.
Yeah, if you hear a lot of noise in this interview, we are literally outside on what was it, Parkway?
Burdick and Park.
Yeah.
Crosstown Parkway.
Yeah, Burdick and Crosstown Parkway. So if you hear a lot of noise, that is why this is a high traffic area.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you spoke on that, because there's a couple people who we spoke to who are not in favor of any of those things.
Really done their homework on it.
Yeah, or have not done their homework on it at all. You call yourself a progressive, and you said Bernie Sanders endorsed you. What are some of the progressive policies that you are actually fighting for in this campaign?
You know, one of the big issues right now is making healthcare a right in this country, and single payer, and it's partly because our healthcare system is so broken, and Fred Upton and his party have been pushing us backwards. You know, the sad thing is that we pay more for healthcare than any other industrialized country, and yet our health standards are not even as good as in most of these other countries. So we just look at the example of Canada. They pay less than $5,000 per person. We pay over $10,000 per person on average for health care, and they have less infant mortality, longer life expectancy, and there are very good reasons for that. It's because if everyone is covered, then you can focus on keeping people healthy rather than the private insurance system that focuses on just fixing disease when something goes wrong with your health. The private insurance system, we spend 30 cents on the dollar on administration and overhead, and then profiteering by these pharmaceutical companies that we just do not. That is just wrong. Fred Upton has been supporting these things. I think this is going to be his vote back in May of last year to push this Republican health care plan that would have kicked 38,000 people in our district off health care. We're going to remind people about that. When he pushed that bill, his favorable rating in this district fell to 39%. That's the lowest we've ever seen. So people are paying attention.
I'm surprised it was at 39%. Like, with Fred Upton's record, it should be like 12.
Well, he plays that moderate Republican card pretty well. So.
he plays that game, but my campaign is about letting people know that is just not the reality. He votes 98% with Donald Trump. He talks about being bipartisan, but he's been supporting profiteering. He's been blocking the regulation of opioids. He's been completely in the pocket of the oil and gas industry. You know, he talks about being for the environment. My goodness, he gets a 14% national environmental score from League of Conservation Voters. This guy does not understand what it means to care for the environment.
Well, I mean, it's also, when you talk about healthcare, I mean, the Democrats are now pushing this half-baked, we're kind of sort of for public option thing now that a lot of people are pushing now. Some more centrist Democrats are pushing now, instead of jumping on Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill or the Congress's version of Medicare for All. So there's more public pressure to do something rather than nothing. But you are absolutely right. The number one thing that we should be doing is fighting for universal health care. How would, because more establishment media would tell you, how would you pay for that if you're going to push for Medicare for all? So just to be like everyone else, we should ask, devil's advocate, how are you going to pay for Medicare for all?
You know, again, the basic fact about Medicare for All is that it's cheaper than the private Medicare system. So yes, the way you pay for it is with progressive income taxes, the way we pay for most things in our federal government. But at the end of the day, if someone's paying their income tax, that's money they're not paying for their health insurance. So it's going to end up, people are going to be better off. They're going to be paying less, not paying more.
I mean, another thing that we could do, and this is something that came up in the Medicare for All town hall that Bernie Sanders talked about. If we were to let everyone enroll in Medicare, and we were supposed to drop that number instead of at 65 to 0, yep, we would save more money right now, and we wouldn't have to spend an extra dime. And that's not being talked about by any candidate.
That is the truth, and I've been talking about that in every forum that I've attended. If you watch my forum, you heard me say it.
Another big question that's come up, another issue that's been in recent media is guns and gun control. There was another mass shooting.
The Waffle House.
There was a
night. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There was a Waffle House shooting in Tennessee last night. Last time I checked, it was 3 to 4 people that were shot and killed. Four people died. Not gonna lie, Michigan has the what could go wrong bill when it comes to gun control and letting people have guns and having concealed weapons in bars and stadiums and schools and other things. How do you feel about gun control, and what's something that you will be advocating for?
Well, first, let me say that I really respect and appreciate what these high school students have been doing in saying that look, they need to be safe. And that, if we ask, why is it that we do not have just common sense gun control that they're asking for today? The answer is really simple. The National Rifle Association, that they have, they've got the majority of Republicans sort of by the balls, excuse me.
That's all right, you can say balls. That's FCC friendly, so.
Okay.
So using any of the George Carlin words.
No, but seriously, the overwhelming majority of Americans want there to be universal background checks. The majority of Americans understand, yes, we have a right for, if you want to go hunting, if you want to have your own handgun for personal protection, that's your right under the Constitution. But there's no right to have a weapon that can shoot 60 bullets in 60 seconds. There's just no need for that. So I would support a ban on on new sales of assault rifles, and then the assault rifles that are already out there. You should just like to have a car. You should have to get a license. Keep it locked up, and then when you want to go and use it for recreational purposes, then you take it out. But there's no need. These things need to be better controlled than what they are today.
I would also advocate if something that another policy is that it's about incentives. So if you have an incentive to buy a car, or you want to give up your gun in a safe way, there should be gun buyback programs that don't stigmatize people and things of that nature.
Sure.
There's also been polling that has come up about a semi-automatic weapons ban, a background check, universal background checks. There's a couple legislation about banning bump stocks and things of that nature. When you get the blowback from this, because you're going to get blowback about guns don't kill people, people kill people, what would your response be when you have to talk to Congress or your other members and colleagues about gun control?
Okay, my response is I care about the safety of American citizens. And it's very clear that we have so many more people killed in the United States by guns than any other country in the world. And I certainly support the Second Amendment. I support people's right to own a gun, but like anything, it should be responsible. Whenever you have two different rights, the right to life and the right to hold a gun, then you have to figure out, well, what is the right way to balance one right against another, right to safety? And you have to say, well, what's the right way to balance? Like, you do not have a right. Well, you have free speech, but you can't go into a theater and yell fire, because that is going against people's rights to safety. So I think that in guns it's basically the same thing. And in terms of where that balance lies, the overwhelming majority of Americans see where it lies. That you have to be a responsible person for that, and that means the background check. So if you have engaged in public violence before, then that should disallow you from owning a gun. The responsible use of a gun are for things like hunting and for things like personal protection, and the guns that are sort of used in the military, for war, there's no need for citizens to have those just walking around in the streets.
So you would vote against what most of Congress and the Senate did when they passed a law saying that people who are on a terrorist watch list or domestic abusers or people who are mentally ill to the point where they can't pay their bills, you would vote against that provision and letting them having a gun?
Yes, I would. You bet.
All right. And do you have any questions?
Oh yeah, I could start off with some. So why don't we pivot to a current events type question? You might have some stuff to follow up with this one too. So recently over the weekend, the DNC made another brilliant strategic move. I don't know if you've heard about this, Lawrence, but they're filing a lawsuit against the Trump campaign, Russia, and WikiLeaks. And 2 out of 3 of those things I don't have a particular problem with. I don't know exactly where they're going to go. The third one I'm a little anxious about, and it's kind of a 2-part question. So I'll ask first, like, kind of your response. So they're ostensibly filing suit against WikiLeaks for, publishing this information that for
telling the truth.
Committing the horrible crime of telling the truth about the shenanigans they were up to. Now, I have been in a room with Keith Ellison, and one of the things that I've told him, and sorry, I won't go on, this tangent won't last too long, but one of the things I told him is, like, when I am knocking door to door, whether it's for a candidate or for an issue I'm working on, a lot of people will have a hesitancy to get involved with the Democratic Party. They'll literally say to me, we don't like how they screwed over Bernie Sanders and his movement. So I'm wondering, like, especially as somebody who ran in 2016 and kind of had this hanging like an albatross around their neck, how do you respond to this action by the DNC, and how do you feel about how it will affect the 2018 race?
Well, first, I think that we definitely need to have the various judicial authorities looking into the collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, because it's illegal to have a foreign government interfering with our elections, and this needs to go through a proper process. And I'm glad that Mueller is, unturning every stone in that area. And if the DNC wants to get in on that as well, I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with the DNC tipping the scales on Democratic primaries when the voters haven't had their say. And I think it's become very clear that the DNC was basically under Hillary Clinton's, to some extent under her thumb, under her direction. And that was just not right. So I'm certainly against that. I think that this whole system of superdelegates is not really all that democratic, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.
And that, that if you believe in one person, one vote, that we can sort of adopt that in the Democratic Party as well. Mm-hmm. I think that the Democratic Party, in a lot of ways, has not represented the real values of equality and democracy the way I would like to see it do that.
Mm-hmm. And my follow-up to that too is so there's something a little bit more serious about it too. There've been people kind of like poking at how this is a bad strategy and whatnot, but there's the danger of press censorship. Actually, Glenn Greenwald had a pretty good article in The Intercept about this, and it's the idea is. It sets a really unsettling precedent when you are literally bringing lawsuit against a media organization. And granted, some people like WikiLeaks, some people don't, but you are literally bringing suit to an organization for printing materials about you that make you look bad but are true. They're not libelous. Comparable to say like the Pentagon Papers leak. So another thing we kind of talk about on the show too is like, as much as we want that investigation with Mueller, and we want that to go through too, but there is also the danger that a lot of what's going on with Russiagate is being weaponized to target underground or not non-mainstream media. So
just to add on that, if you haven't seen the CNN report about how they smeared Jimmy Dore or or how they smeared left-wing progressive media in grouping them with Nazis and the alt-right. It's an amazing article to see how far corporate media will go to shut down actual progressive ideas or free thought that does not coincide with the mainstream of mainstream propaganda. I mean, and it's not all dangerous. It's not like Trump said that he wasn't going to jail journalists because he doesn't like them. Oh wait, he did. Never mind.
All right. So I guess what this boils down to is like, how would you approach that to your Democratic colleagues in Congress, and overall, like, where is that line between like kind of being good stewards and making sure that there's not a lot of false information out there, but also protecting freedom of the press and free speech.
I am strongly in support of freedom of the press and free speech for sure. In terms of, I think you're right that we have libel laws, but I don't think those are at issue here. There's no question of libel in terms of what WikiLeaks is talking about. And if they're just reporting the truth as they have seen it, then the freedom of the press is absolutely critical for accountability of government. And I think we need to bend over backwards on that side in terms of who we're going to be supporting. When I was in college, one thing that I got involved in was the anti-apartheid movement. This was a big issue. My university was investing a lot in, this was back in the day, a lot in companies that were profiting off of apartheid. But another thing I got involved in was I was working one summer with the New England Free Press, which is basically a radical press. Okay. Your listeners may not remember Our Bodies Ourselves. That was one of their publications.
Hey, that's a good one.
But they used the profits from that to basically fund their more sort of radical publications. So part of the way I learned about the political geography of the United States was this back in the day of card files. Okay, before computers and stuff. So there was a big section for Cambridge and Berkeley and Madison and Austin, Texas and Ann Arbor, and I don't remember Kalamazoo at that time. But we have to defend the right to any kind of political opinion. I mean, we have to defend the right to Nazi opinion. Of course, I think it's wrong, but that's what free speech means. Is that you can't be censoring just because you don't agree with the content.
Okay. I mean, to add to that, I would like to ask you about two issues that's come up recently. You talked about
Unfortunately, we're going to have to cut it there. As I said earlier, we will be posting the full interview online. And we end up going into a lot of very interesting different topics. At the end, I asked him some questions about campaign strategy, especially considering Paul Clements has run before. But as I said, we'll be posting that up on our YouTube channel, and you can check that out anytime. All of our episodes, past and present, are uploaded there. This episode will likely be uploaded around 2 to 3 p.m. tomorrow if you want to check it out. I want to thank all my guests who came on the show today. Joe Lorenz of the International International Youth and Students for Social Equality Group here on campus, and Daniel Smith from Kalamazoo Nonviolent Opponents of War. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, your only source for political revolution. And I want to tell y'all to keep on fighting for that revolution solution.